Narayan, it's so great to have you in the studio for this podcast. And I will say this, my first and ongoing and recurring introduction to Ultraviolette has been driving by the Koramangala inner ring road from where I stay to Indiranagar. And the Ultraviolette office comes on the left. And I used to keep wondering, man, look at these really cool bikes hanging from cables in this double ceilinged kind of office. And I wonder what kind of bikes these are. Coincidentally, you started Ultraviolette the same year that the Ken also started. It's fascinating that we've both been in Bangalore. We've both
similar part of town.
Exactly, right? Indiranagar. And we've been in Indiranagar for most of that time as well. And yet here we're meeting in the 9th year of our respective journeys. But hey, I'm thrilled to have you here.
Likewise. And if anything, that just tells us how quickly time goes, right? When you're chasing larger goals.
Well, I mean, I'm sure. Tell me more about that. So if I said that to someone else, if I said that to someone, let's say, who's in a job and say, did you realize how quickly 9 years went by in the company that you work for? I'm not sure a lot of people would agree.
True.
But you said as a founder that it's amazing how quickly time goes by. True. You spent 9 years building this organization. And yet you feel it's gone by quickly.
Right.
What does that mean? I fully agree with you. Let me also say that I agree and I know what you mean. But what did you mean when you say it went by so quickly?
I think it stems from the fact that the kinds of aspirations that you start off with and the kinds of goals that you want to hit, right? I mean, as a startup in the hardware space, your competition is the legacy companies as well. So you're not as flush with capital or resources as the larger companies, which means at any point you do more with less. I mean, that has to be the mindset. And when you're operating like that, time is, I think, the biggest limiting factor because you're always chasing for more time to accomplish something or get something done. And when you're in that state of mind, I mean, to me, I think the way I rationalize what you asked me was just this. You're always at positive for time, and as a result, years have gone by and you still feel quite fresh, which I think is an interesting way to look at it.
No, I mean, I think that's very well put because you're absolutely right that the thing that most founders are worried of running out of is time.
Right.
And because that time encapsulates various other resources. I might run out of money, but what does money buy you?
Right.
Money buys you time. I might run out of talent, but what does great talent buy you? Talent buys you innovation, which buys you time.
Right.
So in some senses, you're always trying to buy time, especially as a startup and especially as, in a disruptive space like yours, where you're trying to come up with a product which takes on existing technologies, not just incumbents, but existing structures.
Right.
You always wish, if I had more time, I could pull it off.
True.
Right? I mean, before we move on from this, I do want to ask another question about this time as well. But this time is also, especially when it comes with technological shifts, is a double-sided weapon. Because when you buy more time, there is always the risk that the technology curve that you're hoping to ride or the product that you're building also perhaps gets obsolete. So There are like these two balancing things, right? One is you hope, I wish I had 2 more years, but then what that comes with the flip side, that what will happen in 2 years? What if somebody comes up with a technology which is even better than mine?
True.
How do you think about balancing these two aspects of time?
No, you're right. And if you're talking about 2 more years, then the goalpost has moved in that exact extension of timelines. And I mean, coming back then, perhaps it's always a question of chasing to do more with time at hand.
What
and
was it when you sorry to interrupt you, when you started, when you
Sure.
and Neeraj started Ultraviolet, when you met and discussed the idea for the first time, and we'll probably go back around how you got to that
Sure.
first. This was not the first time that you guys were trying to do something together. But let's talk about Ultraviolet, right? What was the first bare bones, earliest vision of what you wanted to build? What your goal was?
Our goal was to do in India what, say, a Sony did in Japan, what an Apple did for design and tech in the US. And I mean, we've been through the system. Both of us are engineers. We've grown up in India. We've looked at all the aspirational brands and value they've provided, both in terms of design, tech, and services. And by the time we completed engineering, or close to that point, we were confident that we've collectively as a country got the talent. And if you looked at the brains driving a lot of the tech in various parts of the world, it is from Indian origin as well. So, is it possible for us to create something of that kind of value? And of course, when you take on such a open-ended goal, we also realize it's not going to be something that you achieve in 2 years or 5 years. It's going to be a much longer horizon that we have to look at. But that is...
Did the two of you have a discussion on what kind of time commitment are we going to give this before we start?
I mean, that I think we were quite confident. It is our careers going into it. Or, I mean, career is more of a put in context to a job. But yeah, pretty much if you're doing this out of passion... So you knew that
if you pull off, if you do something and if it doesn't die, because the thing that most founders are worried of in the first 2-3 years is not, will it be successful? Will it die?
Yes,
right? If it doesn't die, the two of you were essentially saying that or at least planning that we'll build something that is forever.
Yeah, till we are intellectually capable of doing so. So that we are both clear of. And some of that comfort also comes from knowing each other from when we were kids, right? So
You've known each other from what, class 5?
Class 5. Same school, Frank Anthony.
Same college.
Same college as well for engineering. And that 4 years of engineering, I think, laid the foundation for what today we're able to do through Ultraviolet. So,
tell me more. I'm just incredibly curious about this, because in general, most people I've heard saying engineering was good, MBA was good, it gave us some fundamentals, we met a lot of great friends, we got some concepts, but all of the learning came after our education.
Right.
You're essentially saying that no, actually the engineering gave us a solid foundation. Tell me more. How?
Yeah, so the phase leading up to engineering, and between Neeraj and me, the core of engineering did a lot of extremely strong foundation laying for us, because I mean, we can all agree that the syllabus in colleges today are not exactly in line with what the future is for or where the industry is even today, right? It's always a cycle
Completely. Was true 20 years ago, was true 10 years ago. True. And I'm sure it's true today as well,
right,
though the extents may slightly differ.
Right, yeah. So we recognize that Delta was going to be there. And for me and Neeraj, I think passion to build things was always very strong. So I remember in school, he was one of the 2 people in my class who had a computer. That early in the day is when he convinced his parents to invest in a computer, right? And by the time we were in high school, he could do all kinds of wizardry with the computer, hacking my dad's email, for example, because I challenged him whether he can do it, and he pulled it off. And so lots of interesting stories like this, tinkering around with electronics, taking apart appliances at home, trying to build our own DIY systems. So we did a lot of this independently during our formative days. And in engineering, at that point, 2004, 5, 6 in Bangalore was when creative engineering or tech fest mentality started emerging. So all of the colleges across India had a cultural fest, and they also had a equivalent from a technical side. So we started putting some of our time and energy behind this actively. I remember the first ever competition that we won was at RV College, where it was a fest organized by the civil engineering department. Both of us are, I mean, not from a civil background.
You're from the mechanical
Yes.
stream. Neeraj was from the computer science stream.
And we went to RV because a few of our friends said, "Hey guys, why don't you come? There's a fest happening." And we were there, and we saw one of the marquee events of that day was to build a bridge that has to span an expanse of X meters. And there were some guidelines around what kinds of support structures, etc., could be added onto it. But inherently, the finals was whichever bridge takes the most load without collapsing wins that event. And
was it like a simulation, or what
No,
physically
it
did
was
you have
a real
to build?
world,
So what materials?
8-hour challenge, and you had raw materials like your Discovery had the junkyard wars, right?
Right.
So we had wood, we had paper, we had rubber, we had
interesting.
basically it's like a junkyard, and
I got it.
we took a very different approach where the first, I think, of that whole day, 70% of the day went into eliminating what were good but not amazing ideas. I was scribbling on paper, evaluating different things, and then in the last 2 hours is when we actually put something together, and we won that by a fair margin, and that got us addicted. And from that day, I mean, I remember the prize money was 10,000 rupees for that particular event. We were, I mean, at that point, I mean, where we don't really have pocket money and stuff, this is a lot of money, right? And so came home all excited and forgot the winner's certificate. And I live in Jayanagar, and Neeraj used to live in Indiranagar.
Right, and
our parents
Mysore
made us,
Road is not close
Yes.
to either of these places.
Yeah. So our parents made us go back to RV the next day and then get all the certificates as well, right?
Of course, that shows the differing priorities between the students and the parents. The students say, we got the cash prize, and the parents are like,
Yeah.
but where are the certificates, which
Yeah.
are more important? I get it. I mean, it's very interesting. When you were describing you taking 70% of your time to eliminate possibilities and to think of the solution, the only analogy I can think of is this very famous analogy, which I'm sure as an entrepreneur, sometimes maybe founder, you tell your employees as well, that you remember the parable of the two woodcutters.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
one woodcutter, like both are given axes,
Yeah.
and one spends whatever 80% of the day sharpening the axe,
Yeah.
and then bringing it down with just a few strokes, and the other one starts hitting the tree,
Right.
but wears down the axe and cannot bring down the tree.
Very true.
It is essentially, to me, in that moment,
Yes.
it was like, yeah, I mean, did you not feel any pressure? Because in that, when you were not building anything, I'm sure the other competing teams were racing to
Of
build,
course,
and
yes.
and there is always this mental pressure. Look at everyone else. We don't have a single thing up.
Yeah.
Everybody else, the time is running out.
Yeah,
Will we
structures
ever?
are coming up, and
Exactly.
no, we did, but I think for us, solving it or getting to a good solution mattered so much more. I think the possibility of not completing it we figured we'll find some way to get it done, but we also knew we would not be excited by just doing something which is a variant of what somebody else is also doing. So
Interesting. So originality was one of the things you were
Yes.
subconsciously optimizing for. You have a double degree in design, double
Right.
masters in design. I must say, I have not. You are the first principles founder who's got not just a double master's degree, I think so, but definitely double design master's degree. You got like an engineering degree, and then you're like, this is not enough. Then you went to NID, and you did a master's from there, and then you went to
Sweden,
and you did
University of,
another. I mean, I'm just going to ask you this, right? Why on earth did you need to do 2 master's degrees?
Right. Okay, so there's logic behind this as well. So what I mentioned in engineering, right? So similar competitions, the scale kept going up. We ended up taking part in robotics, aircraft, submersibles, amphibious vehicles, whatnot, the various types of contraptions. And our first foray into lithium-ion batteries was actually 2005. So in fact, it's 20 years since we started working with
Wow.
lithium batteries. So that DNA...
What was the context when you first had to kind of work with lithium-ion batteries?
That was a project where we were designing aircrafts, and I think the problem statement was with a given finite capacity of energy, which can stay airborne the longest. That was the competition that we were designing this for. So optimizing weight became important. We had to figure out different chemistries, researching into different prismatic cells, pouch cells. That time cylindrical cells weren't yet a common thing. So yeah, our work started then. Then watertight or waterproof battery tech was when we started building submarine applications for some of our projects in college. So that there we got into thermal extracting heat and waterproofing at the same time. On an aircraft, it's simple. The propeller airflow is enough.
What
to
were you
keep
doing
your,
back then? 2005, like what
This
are the
was
two
when
of
we
you?
were in engineering.
In which year of engineering?
Through all 4 years. We
All
were
4
actively
years.
doing
When
all
did
this.
you folks graduate?
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's try and fast forward that a bit. Great. Like 2005, 20 years ago, you're
Yeah.
like, advanced stages of tinkering,
Yeah.
which is, it's gone from, I think, tinkering to conscious design, I would say, right? Like
Right.
there is an evolution there. And 2008, you're out of college.
Yes. I
and-
joined one of the IT companies. Placement, final year placement, and looking at all of our work, they said some of our clients are Boeing and Ferrari. Will put you onto those projects.
It was an IT services company.
Yes. So,
and little did you know that even if your clients are those, there's absolutely nothing interesting.
Yeah.
You're going to work some back-end ancient system which you will have to fix.
Right. And the first...
Did you end up joining them?
I did join. First 2 months was C++ training, right? Which had nothing to do with in the last 4
Correct.
years
You're
of
a mechanical
college.
engineer.
Yes.
You're learning C++, all right?
So then I figured, the pitching what a client is versus what you end up doing, it's worlds apart. So I still remember training got done and I was supposed to report for start of a project in, I was posted in Chennai, and I just took a call in that 4 days in between that this is not what I want to do. And fortunately, family was supportive. They knew I didn't have a backup. I didn't have an answer to what I want to do. But, oh yes, what happened was those 2 months in training, this is 2008, right? We were still on very patchy internet or network on our phones, but had great high-speed internet in office. And I researched a lot into what my skills could lead to from a career perspective, which is when I discovered NID, I discovered the field of design. All of this wasn't really knowledge that we had when we started engineering. It was either technical or medical in those.
Right, either go get a master's after engineering or get a job, and after or get an MBA or work for a few years, and it's literally some 3-4 options at least. Okay.
And oh man, now that you mention it, final year of college, all of us, not just me, our whole group, we wrote CAT, GRE, GMAT, GATE, the number of exams we've given.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, I have similar experience, but isn't just amazing how I think, it's changed some bit, but still, it's always about, writing an exam without necessarily knowing what's on the other side of that exam, whether you want it as well or not.
Yes.
Right? So you did your research. How do you come at, how do you arrive at NID, National Institute of Design?
So, there were good colleges. There was a Royal College of Art in London. The place I eventually went to for my second master's is also a very reputed university for a long period. Few colleges in the US, but super expensive. I knew we weren't going to be able to afford any of me going abroad to study, nor had I worked to save anything in the bank to fund my own studies.
Your parents will be supportive of you to do something else, but it would be a lot of a burden to expect them to also pay your international college fees while you figure out what you want to do.
We could not. My dad's a doctor he was at NIMANS. So central government for 25-30 years. So so even my dad's perspective was not to optimize for a big bank balance, but job satisfaction, right? And so that meant we could not. Reality was
constraint.
Yes. So NID was something where I knew that we'd be able to do it if I get in. And so I quit my job. The next 3-4 months, I had a gap of 3 to 4 months. Compiled all my work, put it together, figured out what a portfolio is for the first time. Did that, joined transportation design. The entrance exam was fun. 2 years went by real quick. Worked with Mahindra two-wheelers on a couple of projects as my final year project. And what I figured was what's happening in the Indian automotive sector is we're playing catch up to Japan or Europe. And today, of course, Korea and China are also very much part of the mix there. But could I be part of doing something fundamentally new than trying to catch up with trends and tech that is being driven from elsewhere?
All right.
So
Hold that thought. If that's where you were, how did you decide that the answer to that lies in me going to Sweden and doing another master's? Help me understand that.
okay, so what happened was I had job offers with a couple of these Indian manufacturers at that point. I could either take that, or in the meanwhile, I also figured, is there a possibility to work with some of the European or the Japanese companies? But a degree from India, an engineering degree from India, a master's degree from India, there is a reality of not being able to sponsor a visa for an entry level position. I'm essentially going to be joining or applying for an entry level position, right? So my workaround to this was to join a university with very strong industry connects, where your regular classroom projects are driven by Volvo, BMW, and the likes. And then, of course, once you graduate from there, you extend
So,
possibly.
in some
extend
senses, the second master's degree was, in your mind, kind of required if you wanted to break into the global
Yes.
auto majors. That part I agree, because I know of lots of folks who've done double MBAs, like an MBA
Okay.
from, let's say, an IIM in India, and then gone on to the US and done a second MBA
Okay, interesting.
from a Stanford or a Harvard, etc. Not because fundamentally there is, like, they're trying to optimize for what was not taught here, but what will be taught there. But
Right.
that stamp
Opens up,
possibilities. Got it.
very
It's-
true.
Yeah, it's interesting. It opened up possibilities, but
Yes.
yet you're back here in India building. Would you, with the benefit of hindsight, would you still go for your second
No,
master's
because
degree?
the knowledge I gained was quite pivotal. Because at that point, now you're very close to what you professionally want to do. You're not messing around like we did in engineering college, where now you know this is what your career is heading towards, and you're actively leveraging every opportunity, right?
Got it.
So
When did you and Neeraj, I mean, at this point, I'm assuming that, like, because Neeraj did not do two masters, Neeraj graduated and then he got a job.
yeah, he joined
and
Yahoo right out of college.
That's right. And then he went for his MBA
Yes.
from the Asian Institute of Management. And then he joined NetApp, if
Yes,
I'm not
NetApp.
mistaken, right? So now, childhood friends, studied together, did engineering together, tinkered together, going separate ways.
Yeah.
Right? No, I'm sure you kept in touch because you're close friends. How did these paths merge back again?
So there was one attempt at a startup. We didn't register a company, but there was a few months of concentrated effort towards something like this in 2010-11,
Got it.
where we wanted to do something with drones. Back then, it was still drone hardware, but we found an opportunity where the Google Earth vehicles, the amount of inefficiency of physically driving through cities and mapping out the whole world, right? Could we do that with drones? Could we do that with stereoscopic cameras that are able to gauge depth? And the problem there we were trying to solve for is optimizing flight time of the drones. Is it possible for the drones to, tap power from our power lines and then continue flying and not required to come back and swap a battery necessarily? So about a year, 18 months of effort went into this, but of course quite naive. We did some interesting stuff on the tech side, worked quite closely with some of the professors at IISc in Bangalore on the power electronics and some of these areas where we didn't have full knowledge back then, but did not have the know-how of how to actually create a company and scale that up. So this sort of fizzled out in 2011. Of course, post that, Neeraj went to do his MBA. I think the same, whatever I'm saying is the reason he also wanted to get a little bit of the business understanding, went to B school, joined NetApp. Meanwhile, I had completed my master's at Umeo, went to work at Daihatsu Toyota in Japan for some time, then joined Volkswagen in Germany in 2014. Spent some time there as a designer. And we were always in touch. This is when Kickstarter, Indiegogo had started coming up.
But you should be, I mean, basis whatever you've said till now and like, you know, the kind of profile that I've built on you, at this point you should be happy. You've got what you wanted, right? You've gone and like, you know, broken into, first Toyota and then after that to, Volkswagen, right?
Yeah.
That's what you wanted.
Yeah.
Right? Why aren't you feeling that this is it, I've arrived, this is my dream job?
So two companies sort of gave us a different perspective on this. And both of us, we were always looking at interesting Kickstarter projects, discussing ideas of could we do something. Of course, the scale of building an automotive business is a mammoth, right? So we didn't think along those lines at that point. But tech and innovation was always interesting for us. But Tesla sort of showed us that it is possible. Right, when 2008 and 9, when they made a Lotus platform with the laptop batteries, some of the world laughed at it, some of them marveled at it, but that was it, right? Then 6-8 years down the line, when the Model S was then close to being a commercial success by 2012-13, it had started raising people's eyebrows, and you actively take note of, oh, there's a disruptor in the space, which is GMs and Fords of the world, but there is somebody who's commanding not just value in the product, but also value in the brand. And then we actively followed what Tesla was doing. For us, of course, we poured through a lot of the tech and the patents that they built out, but also spent time trying to connect and reach out and speak to a few owners. Tesla wasn't the first EV attempt, but what made it really click? Right? There is a tech success and then there is a consumer success. There's a huge delta between the two, and a lot of products sometimes don't cross that chasm.
Sometimes the greatest tech products don't succeed.
Yes.
Example being, let's say, what was that two-wheeler thing? Segway,
yes.
Right? I remember like the article saying that this is the future.
Right.
And like, Dean Kamen is like, we never got that kind of adoption.
Right.
And sometimes a suboptimal, what people would write off as a product will just get incredible. So yeah, I fully buy your point that there is it's not a 1:1 relation between that best tech product always wins the best consumers.
True. So we spoke to, I think, 50 plus Tesla owners. Most of them, of course, it was only in the Bay Area at that point. All of them had or I would say 80% had a German car in the garage, one of the Merc or the BMW, but Tesla had somehow become a statement of who they wanted to project themselves as.
This is the old Tesla under the old Musk, I must say.
Yeah.
So
got to understand a lot of the nuances from a consumer perspective and also on the tech side.
Can you share some of those?
So one is, I think the most fundamental is, right, if you think about it, right from the cycles that we were, bought as kids to automobiles we have been able to purchase. It's always a matter of pride, right? And it's also mobile, right? Two things in your life that we've observed in most parts of the world: your mode of commute, your personally owned vehicle, and your house are two purchases that you're very proud of. You can't carry your house with you, but you can carry your car or bike with you, right? So if you do not cater to that aspiration, you're losing out on a very big part of the subconscious purchase making process. The Prius had been there for a while. It was pitched as a value for money car. There were, of course, the Nissan also had a couple of
Leaf, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. But these gained some attention for cost of electricity versus cost of
I remember
petrol.
the price pitch was, it's green.
Yes.
I'm doing something for the earth and for the environment.
Yes. But what they missed out was that you buy it, a lot of your decision making has a certain threshold performance requirement in the vehicle, whichever category you're looking at for that matter. So the fact that the Tesla was able to outmuscle a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, which costs probably 10x more than what they did at that point, $100,000 versus $400,000, $500,000, gave a lot of pride. You're not going to use 800,000 horsepower in the city, but the fact that your machine is capable of it sort of flipped the switch for a lot of these guys.
It's no longer a compromise. When I pick something which is good for the environment, it
Yes.
doesn't have to mean it's bad performance. It can be
Exactly.
both.
Yes.
What they call classic win-win.
Yes. And until Tesla, it was either or, right? So that's when we figured very early, if you're building a brand and not a product. A product you could get away with optimizing for what the world needs today. But when you're trying to build a brand that hopefully is here to stay for the long run, then you're thinking not just product 1 but product 10 also, right? What is the DNA that you carry forward?
All right. It's a great place for me to interject and ask, what is the Ultraviolette brand?
Right. So Ultraviolette, I mean, it's our 3 core pillars are design, technology, and performance. So whatever segments now today, we have 2 products in the market with the F77 and a variant of the F77. We've announced the next 3 that are already slated to come out through 2026. And our decision making on when to launch what has been all about our ability to maintain a edge.
Sorry, Narayan, I'm going to ask you this question again. If I were to ask you, I'm a potential consumer.
Sure.
What is Ultraviolette? What does Ultraviolette stand for? I mean, just in a sentence or
Bringing
two.
you the future faster than competition. If I was to simplify it to one sentence, it would be this.
So, right now would it be fair to say it's a performance motorcycle brand, a performance electric motorcycle company?
Yes, because of the product that we have today, yes. But
Right, that's why I said now. Just like
Yes.
Tesla, when it started,
Yes,
had only
yes.
one model. But so therefore, if I zoom out, what is the Ultraviolette brand's ambition then?
I think the ambition, like I said, is to experiment and commercialize tech that is either leading to better user experience, enhanced safety, or more performance. And performance is also relative. If you're talking about a scooter segment, the scooter that we've launched today is 2x the performance of competition in the market today. But it would not compare to a similar motorcycle segment performance where the threshold is very different. So performance also ties into reliability and robustness. When we
Got
talk
it.
about, is the tech going to last you your entire lifetime of ownership? One concern people have with electric vehicles is, do I need to replace my battery midway through my ownership cycle? And batteries, we know, are anywhere from 30 to 40% of the cost of the
cost
vehicle,
of it.
depending on different formats of vehicles. And we had to optimize for that first. And most of our IP that we built in Ultraviolette in the early stages was on the battery tech. And today we offer 8-year and a 8 lakh kilometer warranty. Insane. It's not a marketing pitch. It is data driven based on our test cycles and how much we are able to offer that transparently to the
All
world.
right. A few questions just to kind of get a sense of Ultraviolette. Can you give us some sense of Ultraviolette, the company, in terms of either, let's say, revenue or number of people, etc.? I mean, how big is
Sure.
Ultraviolette?
Okay, so today the team would be cumulatively about 500 people in the company, 250 on R&D, about 150 on operations, sales, marketing, finance, all the other operations, and 100 plus on the production side. So that is the scale of.
Got it. And how big is your customer base today? Since when have you been selling? Actually, when did you roll out your first consumer bike, and how many Ultraviolette bikes and customers are there on the road today?
Sure. So we started the company in 2016. Estimated 5 years to launch. COVID happened. 5 became 7. Also allowed us to take a step back. We were working on modular batteries when we started because we weren't clear if India is going down the way of charging or swapping at that point. Then it became more and more clear that if you have reasonably fast charging and enough and more range on the vehicle, then you don't have to optimize for swapping. Swapping also comes with the risk of putting heavy capital into a network, and the network itself might go obsolete with battery chemistry changing. So that pivotal shift in storage strategy that move happened during the COVID reset period. So we launched our first batch, the pilot batch of vehicles in 2023, a smaller batch of vehicles only in Bangalore. 2024 is when we launched the pan-India expansion. So 24 onwards, the first batch of vehicles also got a lot of new features which came in with the Mark II. The F77 Mark II is what we called the current generation of vehicles. All of that was designed to be adaptable to our early adopters as well. We didn't want any sort of early adoption remorse to kick in. So we took some extra effort to make it compatible with the hardware systems on the first batch of vehicles. Traction control came in. Regenerative braking went from 3 levels to about 9 levels, where we recover today about 30% of input energy is recovered via regen. A lot more safety and security features came into the vehicle, and all of this translated back to the first generation owners. Cumulatively, till date, I think we'd be close to about 2,000 vehicles pan India. Today, live in 15 cities across the country. And I'm just coming back from our launch in Europe as well. So 2025 is going to be the pilot expansion in Europe. We've launched the vehicles in Germany, France, Netherlands, also in UK, Italy, Spain and Portugal is going to follow soon. So this is where we are.
Sound like a very stupid question, but why did you launch in Europe?
Right.
And I mean, I'll clarify my stupid question with saying, let's say, for example, just to use an example, right? Ather
Right.
has not launched in multiple countries around the world,
Right.
right? I'm just using Ather as an example to say that there is a parallel universe where Ultraviolette says, you know what, we're going to focus only on India.
Sure.
And the market is big enough, etc. But obviously you've chosen a path where you say we are going to focus on India also, and we are also going to expand to Europe.
Sure.
Why did you decide it's time? Because it will call for additional management bandwidth, resources, attention, etc. from you. Why did you decide to do that?
So if you look at it from the vision of what we were building, like I said, the companies like Sony and Apple were always attempts that inspired us, which also brings a global market into play. So that was always part of our vision, which led to decision making on a lot of hardware and software right through 2016 to 2023, where we had international requirements and certification compliances in mind as we designed the vehicle itself. Now coming to why Europe, why now? So we've been in India for about 15 months now. Active sales now, the ramp up has begun across the country, pan India. By end of 25, we should be in close to 100 plus locations in the country. So India has now a certain amount of predictability in operations and scale up, from production to the dealer partners to the retail scaling up. This is a pilot in Europe, and a very important pilot because there is a very strong market gap in Europe. If you look at Europe, EV adoption in cars has been quite strong. With scooters, not so much, because the range threshold in Europe is higher. So a 3 kilowatt or a 4 kilowatt battery pack, which does 150 odd kilometers of range in India, might not be suitable for the Europe requirements. Real estate in the cities is super expensive. Most of the people live on the suburbs of the city, and average distances traveled are easily 100 kilometers a day, even on a two-wheeler. So even the scooters that are doing well in Europe, the BMW C04 comes with a 8.5 kilowatt hour battery pack, right? So battery capacity is a major factor for Europe. Average riding speeds are higher. Average distances on a daily basis is also higher. Perhaps one of the reasons why what works as a commute vehicle in India might not exactly fit in the same format in Europe. Second, when I spoke about the gap in the market, the mid-segment of motorcycles, where we are now positioned with the F77. By mid-segment, I mean the 400 to 600 cc power band of motorcycles. There is no electric option available in Europe. You have the IC engine options from Honda, Yamaha, KTM, BMW, all of these companies, which are all priced between 7,000 to about 10,000, 11,000 euro. That is the range of what all these machines cost. Now, there are also EV motorcycles in Europe. Harley Davidson has a sub-brand called the Livewire, which is electric Few companies from the US, Canada, a few from Europe as well. And the performance is similar to what the mid segment is, but the price points are closer to 20,000 euro, 17, 18, 20,000 euro, and goes all the way till about 40,000 in some cases as well. So, a compelling electric proposition at price parity with IC engines does not exist in Europe, and that is what we are looking at, and that's what has made the F77 a very, very interesting proposition in Europe. So we are retailing at 9,000 euro today, very, very much in the IC engine band.
Got it.
But with all the advanced tech that we are bringing in.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at the consumer transportation segment, it looks like motorcycles are the laggards of technology adoption. By that I mean, and in the context of electric vehicles, right? Cars were like, we could argue that cars, there's a significant amount of electrification that's already take place. There are many European countries where, Scandinavian countries where it's mostly EVs. China is mostly EVs. Even in India, there's a significant EV penetration, which is going up. US, of course, under Trump is a completely different ballgame altogether. If you look at scooters in India, there's a significant EV penetration.
Yes.
In bikes, it's harder. Why is it harder?
Right.
And I'm not talking about Europe. In Europe, you explained a certain context. In India, there are a lot of bikes, right? So the arguments in favor of doing an EV bike and shifting to EV should apply to bikes as well. But yet, bikes seem to fall behind cars and behind scooters when it comes to the evolution to EVs. Why is that?
Okay, so if I was to think of what's happening in India, right, one way to look at it would be look at the split in the IC engine world of two-wheelers. It's 65% motorcycles and about 25% scooters. Right, so that has told you, and that world has evolved over the last 40 years. And with EVs also, the requirement in your commute is not going to drastically change compared to what has taken place over 4 decades. So that split, it may not be a drastic 70-20 split. I think it's going to be a fair 50-50 split as EVs mature, but hasn't yet happened today. 2 reasons. Scooters today operate in and around that 5 kilowatt performance output number, right, from a power of the vehicle.
What is there an equivalent to how you, because see the thing about how does one compare 5 kilowatt of power, because is there a comparable cc or horsepower?
100 cc.
It's 100 cc.
Yeah, 75 to about 100 cc. That's where that band lies, which is where the Activas of the world, all of these scooters also operate from the IC engine. The scooters that are doing well are between 100 to 110 cc today. So that is a 4 to 6 kilowatt output from the motor, right? So one thing that had happened earlier in India, we got a lot of white-labeled white-labeled plug-and-play kits from China and a few other countries, which weren't even outputting this much power, but were retailing in the country, some of them under the radar, some of them didn't require a license. You to have a license to ride it. Some of them also didn't require certification, and some of them also started with lead acid batteries. So the association of the early EV adoption in India wasn't very, very positive. The cost to benefit ratio wasn't very strong. Once things started transitioning to lithium batteries, I think the perception and the utility has gone up quite significantly. Now in the 5 kilowatt output band, tech has sort of become commodity. Some companies have developed their own tech. Ather, like you mentioned, is one example. But a lot of the other companies have taken the route of assembling or doing some of it in-house and outsourcing a few other components. So the fundamental difference when you now go from scooters to, say, mid-segment motorcycles is now you're dealing not at 5 kilowatt output, but you're dealing with the equivalent of 300 cc, 400, 500 cc, and that power band. And when you go towards that, you're talking about 20 kilowatts all the way to 50 kilowatts. Now we're talking about a 10x increase in the power output. And if the current also goes up 10 times, the heat and losses is an I square R function. So the thermal management is now a 100x challenge that you need to solve for what you earlier did with a lower powered scooter segment. So the R&D cycle is higher. Ready available components are, I mean, there are no ready available components where you can
So it's
get
not a
everything.
low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
It's not an easily solvable problem.
Yes.
All right. Why did you folks choose to? I mean, and at some point, I do want to switch back to. You said you spent the first 7 years
R&D,
in R&D.
Yes.
Now, I want to go back and ask you, who wrote your first check as a business, and what was it? What was your pitch to them, and what was your promise to them?
So Neeraj and I have worked on several projects, like we mentioned, right? So when we started, a lot of research went into Tesla, the consumer angle, the tech angle. We also looked at what a company like Gogoro was doing in Taiwan. Gogoro is one of the first attempts at battery swapping at scale, and a very, very well-defined consumer experience from the not only from the product but the system perspective as well. Of course, today that also meant that same system is not as easily scalable outside of a crucible of Taipei to other markets. But very interesting to look at very different, I mean, completely different approaches by different cultures in different parts of the world. And we looked at scooters, motorcycles, cars. Scooters, we knew that it is sort of a commodity play. When you're building something for the long term, how do you build emotional connect with the consumer? That happens in a slightly more aspirational class of vehicles. Motorcycles are also a personal purchase, right? Scooters are more of a utility for the whole family. Motorcycles also had the open canvas to build tech that didn't exist for that class of power. So that was an opportunity for us. It ticked all the boxes: building new tech, building tech ground up, holding the IP, and creating an aspirational or a brand connect to what Ultraviolette stands for. We looked at cars, but we didn't have the visibility into raising capital for somebody funding a 10-year project. And cars are also, if you think of the consumer mindset, not just you, your immediate family, your colleagues, your neighborhood, everybody needs to give you that giant thumbs up to purchase a car, right? So,
right, you're right. It's the bike is actually much more personal.
Yes.
And what you think and what you feel plays a much bigger role in which bike you drive vis-a-vis what car you drive.
Yes. So due to that aspect, and of course, India didn't have too many hardware attempts before that. So raising capital, we weren't clear on that path ahead for a requirement of a four-wheeler, which is an order of magnitude higher than two-wheelers. So didn't look at cars, also didn't look at scooters because we knew the market is potentially going to get crowded. What is our differentiator? We weren't clear on that aspect. If it's just about pricing lower than competition, are we doing justice to, standing for tech and design? Also wasn't clear, which led us to mid-segment motorcycles. And there we realized the core of IC engines today is the engine. Whoever has more optimally performing engine, more power to weight ratio on the engine, better mileage on the engine, usually has better success in the market. Now, the equivalent of that on EVs is not the motor, it's actually the batteries. Because an engine also has a similar value in terms of the cost of materials going into the motorcycle compared to what a battery does. Battery holds between 30 to 40% of the cost of the vehicle. Engine comes somewhat close to that figure. May not be as high as 30 to 40%, but still considerable as one standalone component. Now, why I'm saying batteries is because motor technology has evolved for many, many decades now. There is incremental advancements happening in motors, but batteries are where fundamental innovation is currently happening. And I think the next 5-7 years is going to see a lot more fundamental.
Yeah, I keep hearing
progress.
Like every other month I keep hearing CATL or someone else from China demoing some kind of, this is this battery that will charge in 5 minutes and will give you 900 kilometer range, etc. and all that, right? So you're absolutely right that, battery technology seems to be evolving far, far rapidly, and especially in China than the rest of it.
True.
So you decided to pick batteries as...
So we picked mid-segment motorcycles first, And then we figured with whatever money we have in the bank between Neeraj and myself, we put that into not a beautiful vehicle first, but reliable battery tech first to a demonstrable.
What does that mean when you say you put it like? Did you assemble it, and if so,
No, no,
how?
we spent 1 year building it out.
How? What does that mean? Imagine, like all of us, me included, have no idea what it means, because our understanding is that battery packs are bought or they're assembled by someone else. But when you are two entrepreneurs who are spending a year building it, what does it mean? Were you in your garage? What were you buying? What were you assembling? What was that actually?
Pretty much a garage. This was our previous office in Jayanagar. This was on the first floor. I mean, we had a friend of mine who had leased out the ground floor to a bank, and she gave us some benefit on the rent, because we were bootstrapped at that point. We needed all help possible, right? So we took that space, grew from a team of 3 to a team of 15 odd in that space, till the point that I'm coming to of what we developed. So when we talk about advanced battery tech, one was batteries of a certain capacity, like say a 5 kilowatt hour battery pack. Today, most of our scooters in the market are between 2 to 4, 5 kilowatt hour capacity, right? But now those batteries are powering a 5 kilowatt motor. But can we build a 5 kilowatt hour battery pack that can power a 30 kilowatt motor? That means the current draw from the battery is so much higher. The weight of the vehicle of a motorcycle is much higher than a scooter. So the amount of power you need to get to acceleration and top speed and all of that, we were talking about a 0 to 60 less than 3 seconds, 0 to 100 in about 7 seconds. And the safety aspects and the thermal aspects, and how do you draw that much power for that long without any of the systems heating, which means not just the engineering of the BMS to be able to safely
That's the battery
output.
management system.
Yes. Not just the BMS outputting that much power safely, but also thermal engineering. How do you extract the heat from the cells to the outer layers, and then from the enclosure to the external world?
Got it.
And
so this is what you spent the
first
year
year,
and a half,
yes.
first year. Sorry, but I before I forget, my question to you was that who wrote your first check?
Yes. So with this achieved, we went to our first investor meeting. And it took us about 6 months of cold calls, and we're not from the startup community or a business background, right? Had to get in touch with people on LinkedIn, talk about a lot of it. At that stage, VCs found the ambition a little too risky, right? I mean, no visibility into what we wanted to do in the future with just a cool battery tech being demonstrated. The first person who took a bet on us was Vishesh Rajaram. Today he runs a fund called Speciale Invest, and Speciale invests in predominantly deep tech ventures in the hardware space in India. And Ultraviolette.
When was this? When was your first investment?
2016, end of 2016. I think we were nearly out of runway also by that point. And
I mean, do you feel comfortable telling me how big your first investment was?
First investment was about $200,000.
Got it. Now, obviously, like if you're also running out of money and if you've spent most of your savings up till now on a bootstrap this thing, that's a great amount of money. How much have you raised since starting?
Till date, we would have raised in north of about $70 million.
That's a decent amount, but it's not outrageous considering that you're operating in, you're trying to build bikes and everything from scratch, etc.
No, we've been extremely frugal. The size of the team when we got the product to pre-production was just 45 people. And what we did slightly differently was all of our early team members, highly passion driven, but also came with between 8-10 years of work experience in relevant fields. And to solve some of these large challenges, I mean, if you think about it, there's no battery engineering expertise in India in 2016-17. So the team that took up battery electronics and battery safety came from Honeywell Aerospace. That was designing aircraft electronics. And to us, that was the closest industry where safety on electronics had to be super robust, where you cannot afford a cascading failure on a flight. right? It is always a soft failure, and you have systems that can take over. So that is the architecture that went into our battery pack engineering. Our head of mechanical systems also came from the background from ISRO and Safran. Safran is a French consultancy working on with Airbus and a few other companies. So he was in his previous
How did
role.
you find your? I read somewhere. Is it true that you between the two of you did about 600 interviews to find your first 50, 60
Easily.
employee?
Yeah.
So
10 plus interviews and scouting a lot more
how
people.
are you finding these people? How are you expanding your network of search? In large companies with large budgets, typically you'll go to like a headhunting firm or a search firm and say, this is my budget, this is the kind of people that I want.
Right.
They will go and do the work for you.
Right.
How did you folks do it? Because you're building a company, you're designing batteries and products, and you're also trying to figure out who to hire, interviewing them as well.
Right. So this headhunting approach wouldn't work for us. We did speak to some of these firms. It wouldn't work because you're filling a role. But in that phase of building the company, the first, say, 20, 30 people in the company, you're building the teams around the people. You're not defining a JD and then getting somebody to fill it. You're meeting people with the right motivation and the right skill set, and then building functions around them. So the approach was very different back then. And
what were you looking for as a founder? If you can reflect, I get that sometimes, but so it's like, again, like this is one of those things which can go wrong, right? When you find a person and they're great and you build the function or the role around them, sometimes it works great, but sometimes it could maybe not as well. But just help me understand, what kind of conversations were you having? What kind of questions were you asking? Because I mean, whether it's Honeywell, whether it's Safran, etc., these are large established organizations, and the people who are working there are used to working within these organizations and their setups and their colleague networks, knowledge bases, etc. And you're trying to understand and ask them, would you want to come and work for us? We are exactly the opposite of that. We have ambition, but we don't have all of these support systems, etc. and all that. So what are you using to judge whether people working in large companies will succeed in a startup mentality, and what are you asking them?
So some of the early people on the team were also people recommended by friends or peers of us who knew what we're trying to build. Very early stage, the world didn't know of Ultraviolette, but our close network knew what we wanted to do. And they, in their extended circles, if they had people that were interested in doing something that contributes more to an outcome than being a small cog in a large machine, essentially that contributed to us meeting a few interesting people. And a few are also quite happenstance. For example, the person from ISRO and Safran that I'm talking about, that was through a colleague of mine. I was into kickboxing at that point. And during one of my kickboxing sessions, somebody told me about his colleague who's doing or wants to do something interesting along these lines. Then we met, we hit it off, and then today it's a 8-year relationship. And then some other examples, Neeraj has spent a lot of time on LinkedIn and blogs that people maintain outside of their professional work, where they do a lot of passion projects. And when someone's doing passion projects, it's not just a job for them.
Their heart is in it.
Yes. So we met a few people like this whom we could not afford. Their CTC was a big chunk of what was in the bank at that point. So for a certain phase, we started working with them on weekends. And over time, that relationship matured where, it made sense for us to take it forward full time.
Just one more question on this before we move on. What's your advice to both founders who are trying to, attract people working in large, experienced organizations, as well as people working in large, experienced organizations who sometimes want to work for startups, but may not know, right? What are the pitfalls to watch for? What are some of the reasons why sometimes these matches, in spite of the best efforts, don't work out?
Sure. So if I was to take it from an early founding team perspective, the pitch to somebody who's working in a well-oiled system is complete transparency. I mean, you don't have to sugarcoat or um, project what we, I mean, always project the potential of what we can be, but more importantly, showcase what their involvement, the scale of their involvement to the success of the organization. Where in a large company like an Intel or one of these MNCs, you're so many levels disconnected from the end consumer and the impact of what you built. Whereas in a team of 20 people that is directly going to do a service or a product which impacts a customer, then your contribution is massive. And of course, that early team, the that I think is for somebody motivated to do beyond what their routine job is. This is the biggest factor. The contribution that I would be responsible for the success of the venture.
And why don't, in spite of the best efforts, why don't some of these relationships work out eventually? I'm not necessarily asking about specific examples from Ultraviolette, but I'm sure as a founder, you've also spoken to other founders, and this is a recurring pattern, right? Because founders, especially of high growth companies and ambitious companies, are always looking for experienced people. Sometimes those experienced people, especially if in a space like you, right? If you were to say, oh, I'm just going to hire experienced people from my peers, well, they may not be peers, and therefore you have to go look for the next best. Like for example, you used Honeywell as a close by, right? Those are different companies, but sometimes those transitions don't work. What are the things to watch out for?
From our observation, I mean, multiple smaller things, but the major aspect is, which also goes back to why we did a few hundred interviews before building the first set of before building the first small group in the organization. It is the mindset and open-mindedness to one in a startup where collaboration across domains is key to success. Ego that I know my subject inside out and my approach is the best way to solve the problem, that will not work. Of course, that skill is very, very much required, but open to talk. I mean, for example, a battery engineering team at our end has chemical engineering, has mechanical engineering, has electronics, electrical, thermal, aerodynamics, and a few other teams in the mix, right? Now, if everybody says my answer is the way to go, it's not going to work out. Instead, you have to come together like a group of curious innovators and figure out the pros and cons of different approaches and then choose in a very open-minded way what is the right approach to solve a problem. So that is one aspect. You may become conditioned to thinking along a certain path the longer you've been in a steady organization. The second one is to go beyond what your JD says. Of course, when you join a company, there are a list of line items that are key to what your role is. But again, coming to collaboration, true impact will not happen if you only stick to what you are meant to do, but you sort of go that extra mile and...
Got it. You use teams and collaborations multiple times in the past few minutes, and it's very interesting because there was this conversation that I was having with someone, and I think it's absolutely true, that in the Indian education system up till class 12th, and by that I mean CBSE, state boards, etc. and all that, we do not value teamwork. It is a very individualistic, zero-sum game sort of thing where you're like either on an absolute basis, what percentage did you get, what did others get, or what grades did you get, what did others. In fact, it's almost like the opposite of it. It's like only what you did matters, or it's a zero-sum game. If you did better, how did the others? And that reflects, by the way, in most of our familial upbringing as well. It's like even if you come back, especially in South India, if you come back with X marks, the first question typically parents have is that what did the other person get, right? And then you transition into workplaces. I'll skip college, right? Where suddenly it's not that. It's not that you win an absolute grade or you win an absolute marks. It's how well you collaborate with your team, and you have to suppress your own ego, like you said, and your own knowledge, and learn to work as a team. Do you find that that there is this bit of unlearning and relearning that
Sure.
has to happen when you go for. And did you see that as well? I'm sure you saw that transition because you went to design school twice.
Sure.
And design school is famously open-minded, explorative, collaborative, etc.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, most cases engineering school isn't.
Right.
And so, I mean, have you observed this thing of individualistic work versus collaborative teamwork, and do you have any tips on?
I mean, that's very, very well broken down. To go back to, if you think about it, that is true. If I was to think of school, what you said exactly applied to my childhood as well. And inherently, since we are resource strapped as a country, right? We're
The scarcity mindset
overpopulated.
keeps
You're
coming in.
always out competing competition. That's a mentality you're brought up with. I think in our schooling system, one thing that helped me was sports. I was actively playing basketball, cricket, and as much as possible engaging my extracurricular time into sports. And I think that teaches you a little bit of assessing each other's strengths. And you can't all be an all-rounder and be the one-man army to win a game, right?
And even your interest in tinkering is an open-ended exploration.
Yeah.
It is not closed-ended in the sense that you're not working towards one final answer where if you get it, you get 100 out of 100 or you don't.
Yeah.
It is, it can go in different directions.
Yeah.
Right? Again, going back to our education system, we don't do enough of tinkering.
Yeah.
Right? Because in some senses, a lot of schools and a lot of parents will be, what's the purpose of this?
Yeah.
Where is this leading to? Right?
Yeah.
So instead, I'm just trying to connect together your interest in sports, which is again team-based and collaborative. I'm going back to your references to tinkering along with Neeraj
Yes.
and many of the, right? And, I'm just hoping that we see more of that because it unlocks so much more of possibilities, imagination, than any kind of closed-ended, move towards a single destination does.
Yeah.
How do you encourage that culture at Ultraviolette?
See, any project that anybody joining the company or is guiding or is at a junior level also involves coordinating with multiple teams. So one of the most key values for us that we encourage is collaboration. And you're right, not everybody may have had that opportunity to spend time in their careers to move towards a collaborative result. But we all understand sports very well. India now follows cricket and football very actively. You have a forward, midfield, defense. So without any of those functioning well, you're not going to win the game. So at any point, my input to anybody would be zoom out, look at the football match or the cricket match, and figure out what the objective is, and then zoom back into what you need to be doing, and don't worry too much about the noise around, because the stage at which we are at as a EV industry or tech industry in this space is so nascent. It is too early to sort of box ourselves in and
to kind of restrict yourself to a path which may end up in a dead end, so to speak, right?
Yes.
You need to constantly be looking at things from a different perspective, which goes back to your original point about time.
Right.
One way you prolong time is by constantly having multiple paths into the future, so that even if one gets shut down, you're not essentially limited by that. I'm sure over the course of Ultraviolette's history, there have been many dead ends. I mean, all businesses have, or failures, etc. Could you share some of them, and what did you kind of learn from those?
So I think one pivotal point was this transition that I mentioned, moving from removable batteries to a fixed battery architecture.
So you were, for the first X years or something, considering and even building that, I assume.
We were,
or prototyping it.
Yes, a lot of our time went into removable batteries because the technological complexity was higher. Because each battery had its own BMS, had its own connector where it connects with the vehicle, had its own authentication mechanism where if Narayan has put the battery into the vehicle, it checks whether I have paid my subscription, am I the authorized owner of this battery? Only then the terminals.
So each battery in some senses needs to be intelligent, modular and fully aware.
Yes.
And you have no option. So it's like the equivalent of, let's say, if I had swappable batteries in my smartphone.
Right.
and then each battery would need to identify that this, when was this made, how much charge is there, who owns it, etc.
Correct.
But now it
correct.
doesn't, because
Yes.
it's just inside.
Yes. So, but 5 years of active R&D went into that. But when we showcased the vehicles in 2019, we got a really good response for performance and design. And on the range, we weren't the first electric vehicle, right? By then, there were a few scooters in the market. And people's calibration of range on a motorcycle had gone up inherently. We assumed 150, 160 kilometers would be good, 100 miles or 160 kilometers. And by the time we launched, people started asking for 200 plus kilometers. And that is when we figured if we do away with the complexity of having to make it removable, we were in fact able to get it all the way to 300. So theoretically, we were able to get close to 300. And that 18 months post-COVID or during and post-COVID went into realizing that from theory to making it work.
When and how did you first, was this, this decision to sort of pivot away from swapping towards charging, this came in the face of customer feedback.
Yes.
How,
So
would
we
you
had
have done anything to accelerate that journey to that customer feedback?
I mean, that's what we did. The motorcycle wasn't production ready, but we had a media event where we invited the auto media and the business media and showcased what we'd built. So then we got real world feedback from across the country, other parts of the world as well. And that's where one of the constant points was ticking a lot of the boxes. Could we have more range? Because it's a motorcycle. Not only am I purchasing it for my office and back, but I also want the optionality to join my friends on that weekend ride out of town.
So this point that you mentioned, I want the ability to do long drives out of town. This comes up again and again, even when people are buying cars.
Yes.
In the context of, let's say, range anxiety.
Yes.
I may be driving 20 kilometers in stop and go traffic every day, but I do want to drive to Goa every now and then, even though that may happen once a year or once in 2 years,
True,
right?
True.
It is in some senses a very irrational thing to demand, right? And yet, you must satisfy it. How do you make peace with it? Because it's easy for us to imagine this as a consumer, but when you're designing a business, when you're designing a product, if you know that 90% of the use case is this, and only this 5 to 10% of the use case demands that you make a product or the battery which is 2x or 3x that, how do you balance it? Because would you not be tempted to say, no, it's fine, we'll just cater to the 90% who don't want to drive to Goa or do long weekend drives, we'll just do the product for the 80%.
Sure.
How do you folks think about this?
I mean, you are right in it being irrational. It's also cultural.
It's emotional, and
If you think about how our parents think of houses, you want that extra bedroom for a relative who comes home once a year, right? And that translates to your budget going up 30-40%, right? So yeah, I have some of these conversations with other family and friends. But on a motorcycle, we realized this was a real requirement, because I've owned about 6 different motorcycles growing up. Neeraj has owned about 4 different motorcycles. A lot of our team are avid motorcyclists as well. And the weekend ride back and forth is a real thing. It is something that and we've seen now that we've got over 1,000 vehicles, close to 2,000 vehicles on the road today. Every city, Bangalore has its own F77 community, Chennai, Cochin, Coimbatore, every city we are at, owners are actively either riding as part of our community or with their friends, and it's a mix of IC engine vehicles and our vehicles going on group rides. So this is actually a real thing. What I would say we don't have to really think about at this point is people who want to go from, say, Kanyakumari to Ladakh. That would fall under that 1% kind of a use case, for which our owners have also demonstrated that. If you think about it, electricity is more ubiquitously available than petrol stations, right? And we've designed our chargers to plug into a 15 amp socket. So our folks who've done long distance rides have been able to charge at dabas, at hotels, at their friends' places, at EV charging points and whatnot. And the requirement for a two-wheeler in terms of charging and charging rate is far lower than for a four-wheeler. You're dealing at max with a 10 kilowatt hour battery pack. A car is 50 to 80 kilowatt hours in terms of the battery capacity. So what you're saying is a significant problem for a four-wheeler, but
Got it.
you can transcend that problem on two-wheelers.
This episode was produced by Hari Krishna. Mixing and mastering for the episode was done by the wonderful Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer. And before you check out, if you've been a long-time listener of the podcast and are glad we're back, do tell the world that by sharing this episode with everyone you think will find it valuable. Okay, this is me, Rohin Dharmakumar, signing off. We'll be back soon with another episode.